everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Jared.
And this is the Italian American Stories podcast. Well, as you can tell today, I have a new co-host. I have my wonderful husband, Jared, joining today for our Veterans Day special.
Yeah, this is great. Definitely an awesome holiday we got coming up here, so I'm glad to be part of this episode.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for doing this. I think it's been about a year since you've been on the podcast. I think the last one we did was for Veterans Day, so
yeah,
this will just be our tradition is you join us on Veterans Day and we'll talk about our wonderful veterans.
Can't handle any more than that.
No, I can't. Nope. That's it. So,
you want to tell them how I was testing the sound today?
Nope, we're not going to tell them. Nope, there are some things that stay hidden behind the podcast screen. But we're going to tell a story today about a Marine, and I'm sure if you've been listening for a while, you know that my husband, he is a Marine as well. So we thought we'd actually start off by telling a couple of jokes about some Marines.
Yeah, do you want to do the joke you found?
Yes, I found a great one. So this joke goes, why do Marines make the best husbands? The answer is, they're always ready to follow orders as long as they think it's their idea.
Yeah.
And I have to agree. I'm just kidding.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
All right. What is your joke, Marine?
Why do Marines have great posture?
I don't know. Why?
Because they're always carrying the weight of freedom on their shoulders.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Another one. Why do Marines make the best friends?
Why?
Because they'd march through hell and back for their brothers and sisters.
Oh, I'm gonna already start tearing up.
That's true.
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah. That's actually a really nice segue into the story that we're going to tell today about Neil Iovino, because I think if it wasn't for him and his other Marines, the situation may have turned out very different.
Yeah, so, this will be exciting.
Like I said, we're going to tell a story about U.S. Marine. His name was Neil Philip Iovino, and he was a World War II veteran. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's get into it.
So Neil was born on January 3rd, 1918 in Chicago, Illinois. And his parents, they actually came to America from Italy somewhere between 1895 and 1897. His father was Dominic Giovino Iovino, and he was born in Naples in 1876. And his mother was Mariana Serpico, and she was born in Naples in 1875. And together they had 8 children, and Neil was actually their youngest child.
Awesome. He was the baby.
He was the baby. And Neil's father, he worked for a short time as a fireman in Chicago.
Wow.
Of course, life is not always easy. In this family, they did face some hard times. So when Neil was young, they actually lost their home during the Great Depression. And so Neil, he actually only went to 1 year of high school before starting work just to help support the family.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. That's the way life was for a lot of people back then. So.
Oh, yeah. They needed everybody to pitch in, whether you're living in the city like Chicago or you're out on a farm, especially during the Great Depression. So Neil, he would work whatever jobs he could find. He did jobs like shelling pecans, delivering telegraphs, selling produce, and even working in rubber factories. But one day, he was walking down the street and he saw a Marine Corps recruiting poster that said education, adventure, and travel. And that was all it took to entice him, and he signed up and was enlisted on December 7th, 1939 at the age of 21.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, I living here in Grand Junction, somewhat smaller. It's a lot bigger now than what it was, but I went in when I was 17. My dad signed a waiver for me, but I was ready to go out and experience new things.
Oh, for sure.
The only vacations my dad really took us on were in the minivan. And we'd go to surrounding states and stuff like that. So I can definitely understand his desire to see what was out in the world.
Oh, absolutely. So, I think adventure is good for young men, young people in general. So
yeah,
it kind of also probably offered him a sense of security as well.
Well, he had adversity growing up, but that just made him tougher.
So he went to boot camp in San Diego, and that's Camp Pendleton, right?
Yeah, it's in Pendleton, MCRD, Marine Corps recruiting station. But yeah, I went to the same area, so they like to call us the Hollywood Marines.
The Hollywood Marines? Because you're just in California.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, that actually will come into play here in a little bit with Neil, so that's kind of funny. But after boot camp, he became a member of the 4th Marines and volunteered for duty in Shanghai, China, where he and his unit, they were in charge of protecting the 25,000 Americans living in the area. His specific duties included chauffeuring and interpreting Italian when needed. And so he was stationed in Shanghai from May of 1940 to November of 1941, but he left because President Roosevelt ordered that all the Marines be evacuated from China and brought back to the United States or be sent to the Philippines.
Yeah, and then we were talking about this before we even started, but I wanted to know what his actual MOS was, which is the military occupation specialty. And I obviously went in much more recently than this gentleman did, but they were doing things different back then because, chauffeuring and interpreting is a pretty vague description. And we looked through the past research and we didn't really see anything specific to his MOS. I just find it interesting. I suppose back in the old days, especially during times of conflict and war, they were just getting people kind of getting butts in seats, filling positions. So sounds like he was working chauffeuring officers and interpreting. It was kind of like a slash between maybe a little bit of a communications type interpreter slash maybe almost like an executive assistant to officers, which is just interesting. I just found that interesting.
Yeah.
So anyways.
Well, and like you said, we searched because online you can see the different awards and stuff that he got, but we couldn't find it listed anywhere. But like you said, it's 1940s, things have changed. And
things have changed a lot.
Yeah. So he actually, when he was ordered to leave China, he actually went back to America for a little while, but very quickly him and the 4th Marines were sent to defend the Subic Bay Naval Base in the Philippines. And during this time, World War II was going on across the globe. Tragically, it came to our shores of America when Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7th, 1941. At this time, Neil was stationed in the Philippines, and I guess you can say all hell pretty much broke loose, and he was really starting to experience the harsh realities of war.
Okay. And then can we just zoom out a little bit there?
Sure.
Stephanie got me this awesome book. It's the USMC. It's a complete history, and it's done by the Marine Corps Association. So just so people know, this was in 1941. There was a lot going on during this year. And as most people should know, that Pearl Harbor was attacked December 7th, 1941. Now let's just back up a little bit. On November 3rd, the Imperial Japanese Navy actually approved the plan to attack the U.S. fleet at Pearl Harbor. Basically a month later, right?
Yeah.
Now, our friend and fellow Marine, Neil, he was in the 4th Marine. So in between that time, November 27th to the 28th, the 4th Marines embarks and sails from Shanghai, you were talking about. He was chauffeuring and interpreting in China, and they sailed from Shanghai to the Philippines. The regiment arrives on the 30th of November. So we kind of have it's kind of nice to have a timeline to see where all these events are happening. He's right in the middle of the Japanese. They got their strategy approved, and then he's moving from China while they're making their way over to Hawaii. He's making his way down from China to the Philippines.
I'm really glad that you did that because it does put it all into perspective a little bit more of all these different events happening in the world and where he is in that time and place. Especially a month before they approved it. My goodness. Yeah. Okay, so he's at the naval base in the Philippines. This naval base is just constantly under attack by aerial bombs, and he was one of the first Marines to be wounded there. So Neil, he was actually hit in the stomach with shrapnel and was sent to a hospital in the Philippines to recover, and he was listed in critical condition. He actually had to have an emergency appendectomy to save his life. And so if we just stop right there, that's pretty crazy, but it even gets a little bit more insane. So while he is in the hospital recuperating, the Japanese invade the Philippines and attack. And this attack was so powerful that the American troops actually surrendered on April 9th, 1942. So the Japanese, they forced 66,000 Filipinos and 10,000 Americans to walk over 60 miles. And this is through the thick jungle, the suffocating humidity and heat. And this was called the Bataan Death March. And the Japanese, they would kill any prisoner who lagged behind or stopped to help a fallen soldier. So within 6 days of this march, 2,500 Filipinos and 500 Americans were dead. Now, remember, Neil is recovering in a hospital when all of this happened, and he is forced to do this march. And of course, this is brutal for him, but luckily, as we started at the beginning of this episode, he had his Marine Corps buddies and his friends who helped him the first 10 miles of the march. Somehow, though, he was spared and he did not have to continue the last part of the march, and the Japanese actually sent him to a hospital to recover, which kind of shocks me because they were shooting and killing men who were just falling behind. So I don't know if maybe his dual language or something saved him there, but for some reason they sent him to a hospital to recover. Very interesting, right?
Yeah, we could speculate a few things there. Maybe they thought that he was a military person of importance. Maybe they thought that he had information that they could glean from him. But, that's speculation. We have a tendency to look at events as black and white things sometimes.
Sure.
And we always have to remember that there's a lot of different people involved. Some people are more kind than others. Maybe whoever the particular Japanese officer showed mercy. It's hard to say, but regardless, thank goodness for him, he was able to have a chance to actually recover.
Yeah. So when he got to this new hospital, he was in such bad shape that he had to have another surgery, and he actually stayed in the hospital for a whole year to recover there. But this was an enemy hospital, and his recovery time was not necessarily easy. He was assigned to hard labor, where he had to lift heavy objects. He had to do airfield construction and road repair. So I think he was working the grounds of the hospital in a sense. Neil's daughter, she said that men came forward later and talked about him and that he was known to be a morale builder while they were in the prison/hospital. She said he encouraged everyone to keep their faith and not lose hope that they would be rescued. And Neil would always say that he knew God would let him see his family and eat another pasta meal one day.
Hey, man. Gotta keep that motivation going. So.
Yeah, whatever works for you, right? And so Neil, he was eventually sent to another prison camp where he received 2 more operations. And I guess the doctors at the hospital, they were in shock that he had actually survived through everything that he had endured. Especially, not only, did he have these surgeries, but the food was scarce. It was contaminated. And Neil would later tell a story that one of the Japanese guards, they had a roster of all the American prisoners, and the guard would run his finger down the list. And when he stopped, he would kill the 5 Americans that his finger was next to. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of some of the stuff that they had to endure. And one of the men that was with Neil, he said that there was about 8,000 people crammed into an area that was about as big as an acre. Disease and all of that kind of stuff is running through these prison camps.
Yeah, 8,000 bodies. Acre is really not that big. So you got to think the typical home, let's just say, 1,500 to 1,700 square foot home. You're usually on about an acre plot. So remove your house and then think about that. And they got 8,000 people crammed in. I mean, they were on top of each other.
Oh, I know.
So
I read in one article where they were talking about where they would remove some soldiers and they would cram them into train cars so full that people would die of just suffocation because they couldn't move. They were just crammed in there. So
brings back disturbing images when you watch videos from World War II, what the Nazis used to do. They would utilize the train a lot, and they would do that to the Jewish folks. And they would cram them in a similar fashion.
That's immediately what my brain went to too. Yeah. Those images, I think, are so ingrained in us that we've seen it through movies or textbooks or whatever. So one American soldier that was in the prison camp with Neil said that he dropped a picture of his wife and a Japanese guard grabbed it. And the soldier, just his initial reaction was to just grab it back from him. And the guard just started beating him and he survived though. So the guards, they would try to demoralize the Americans that were in the camp by telling them that their cities back home in America were all gone. So basically like, we've bombed America. You have nothing to go home to. And the guards would come up to them and say, Chicago, boom, boom, no more. Detroit, boom, boom, no more. And the Americans, they have no way of telling if this is true. They're just kind of like, well, maybe, but we kind of doubt it. And they were pretty sure they were lying. So one day, one of the Americans finally stood up to the guard and said, baloney. And the Japanese guard said to him, baloney, boom, boom, no more. And so after that, the American soldiers were like, okay, we're pretty sure now they're lying. They think baloney is a city.
Oh, gotcha.
I thought that was kind of a lighthearted story in a sense, considering what we're dealing with here.
It's just funny because like when you're in, it's not funny, but when you're in stressful situations, and you're worried about your life, your well-being, things of this nature, you don't know if you're going to see the next day, the best medicine is laughter. So you were saying that his fellow Marines helped him do the first 10 miles. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not surprising. We are taught no man left behind, no Marine left behind, because you're only as strong as your brother next to you. Can't do things on your own. So that is amazing that, God, he went through all those surgeries. Stomach can be a very bad spot too. Infection and stuff like that. So
and then 10 miles through, 10 miles just walking in a straight, like, level ground, but the jungle, and you got to think the bacteria, the humidity, and oh my gosh.
I even watched Bear Grylls episodes where he's concerned, like, even if you get like a scratch in a climate like that, you can get infected horribly.
Yes. So, it's just a breeding ground for bacteria. So one night, though, Neil and the other prisoners, they finally had some good luck come their way when the Army Rangers and a small group of Filipino guerrilla fighters made their way to the prison camp. They staged a surprise attack and they killed all of the Japanese guards. So Neil, he was finally free after spending more than 4 years as a prisoner of war.
Wow, that's amazing, man. And it's cool to see, too, if you're in the military, you know that we all give each other a bunch of shit. You know what I mean? Like, if you're in the Air Force, then it's common to be called the Chair Force.
Sure.
The Army and the Marines give each other shit, but it's all based on mutual respect. Everyone thinks they're the best, but we're in it together. And so it was the same thing when I was out in Iraq. We actually got relieved by Army reservist unit. So yeah, that's interesting. So the Army Rangers, I bet they were so happy to see those guys.
Oh my gosh, I bet they were. Get us out of here. Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's crazy because I saw in one paper that most of the Americans rescued, they weighed about 90 pounds. And you have to think you're in there for 4 years eating this food that's probably consistently making you have diarrhea or puke, and you're doing hard labor. So
hard labor, they're working you, yeah. It was a concentration camp, basically.
Pretty much, yes, exactly.
Concentration camp, POW camp, they're getting what they can out of you. They can't get information out of you that they have them working, so they're using them for what they're worth until they expire. When
Neil's 5 sisters heard of his rescue, they immediately went to their church to offer up prayers and thanks for his rescue. His parents, I think I skipped this part, his parents had actually passed away when Neil was still a teenager. They both passed away from strokes within 2 years of each other.
Was this before he went in the Marines?
It was before he went in the Marines. It was in the 30s.
Yeah,
so
we didn't talk about that.
Yeah, I must have missed that part.
So his parents both died. So you got to imagine tough times during the Depression. I'll tell you what, though, like we were talking about, we don't know how he survived. Well, he was living through the Depression before he even went out there.
That's true.
You know, it's not like he was eating great before he even went out there. Obviously, he was eating a lot better than when he was in the POW camp, but he already had faced a lot of adversity before he went out there. So there's something to be said about that.
Oh, for sure. His parents died of strokes 2 years apart, and he was a teenager, so he would live with his sisters and help them out and stuff. So when he got out, his sisters, they helped care for him. So they were like motherly, like, oh my gosh, let's all go to the church and pray because he's safe. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, tough times forge tough people.
Absolutely. So. That's a great saying. And so when Neil and the other men, they returned to the States in 1945, they were given a true hero's welcome. They had like the ticker tape parades. They had just big festivities, and especially in the neighborhood that his sisters lived in. And Neil told some reporters that he hoped his welcome home dinner was a plate of spaghetti that was a mile high.
So can you just explain what you say, ticker tape?
So a ticker tape parade, we've seen those photos and stuff where confetti is falling through the air.
Okay.
They would just throw shredded paper on the route, and I think it was like a way to like bless them
for confetti.
For confetti, yes.
Ticker tape, so shredded up paper. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at some photos of it on Google right now, and there's like a parade going through a huge city, and it just looks like it's like snowing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So when Neil got back to the States, he had a lot of interviews with newspapers and reporters and stuff like that, and he said that he and some of the other soldiers, they cried when they were handed new uniforms to wear. So when the Army Rangers came in and got them, they were just in rags, probably clothes that they'd found or been given or had been wearing for 4 years. And so when they were handed their new Marine uniforms, he said that was one of the few times he cried because he was so happy to have that new uniform.
I can imagine they still a piece of your soul. And being a Marine, what the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor stand for, and your uniform, it's a strong symbol, so I could see that.
I read in another paper, the Japanese soldiers found an American flag and they fought so hard to keep them from taking that flag. They were outnumbered though, and they didn't have weapons. So the Japanese did get the flag, but they fought really hard to protect the flag. And actually, when the Army Rangers came in and saved them, they took the Japanese flag.
Oh yeah. When I was out in Iraq, I have a flag still. I think I told you we were in Al Qud and we found a school courtyard. This was a school courtyard where kids should be playing in the back wall where it looks like they should have been playing like wall ball or something. They drew silhouettes and there was gunfire. So they were using it as a practice range instead. So we took that flag down from the school. Yeah. I have it now. But here's the deal. Symbols are powerful. It's got to be gut-wrenching, especially when they were in that situation where the Japanese overwhelmed them. And now they're becoming prisoners. They're in rags. They've had their flags taken from them. They're being told lies that they're blowing up hometowns like Detroit and things like that. So
you have to fight for those symbols that give you hope in those moments.
What's your why? You got to find your why. What are you holding on to? Why are you still going on? So they had hope.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's what they're there. They're fighting for their country. So Neil, he actually earned the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart Medal.
People got to know this. These are amazing commendations because they all have different meaning. Obviously, Purple Heart means that you've received some type of wound. But the Bronze Star and the Silver Star are only bestowed upon those that have shown uncommon valor and bravery. So those are some very prestigious commendations.
Neil, he just could not get away from hospitals. So when he got back to the States, they were like, we need to check you out and give you some medical treatment. He had to stay in 3 different hospitals until he was fully recovered. And so after his release from the prison camp and, he's home, Hollywood, which is funny, we talked about that earlier, they actually stepped in and they wanted to make a movie about the Bataan Death March. And John Wayne and Anthony Quinn starred in the movie. The Duke, yes. Yeah. Yep. Neil and other Marines, they were actually involved in it and they would go around to help promote the movie. And honestly, I think it was also to promote supporting our troops as well. And in the film, there is actual footage of the Bataan survivors. And the very last survivor that's shown at the end of the movie, the actor is portraying Neil. Wow. So pretty cool. After promoting the movie, Neil, he went on tours on behalf of the war effort. He was promoting the selling of war bonds and those kind of things. But all of this traveling, it actually ended up causing Neil to have a nervous breakdown and he was hospitalized for a while. But his sisters, they came and got him and cared for him. And honestly, I think it was just he got released from the camp. He came back home. I don't think he really had any downtime. And I think it just all caught up to him.
Yeah, and even more than that, medicine has gotten a lot better since the 40s. So back then, what they might just say, he had a nervous breakdown. He went through a bombing, so he probably experienced some trauma, probably some shell shock from that. Of course, one of the big things now, if you're under heavy explosions and you've had a head injury, is TBI, traumatic brain injury. That wasn't even a thing back then. He could have had traumatic brain injury that went undiagnosed. Here's another thing is, of course, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. You got to imagine, it was go, go, go for him. He got out. He's still doing things, traveling around, doing war bonds, things like that. It was probably all surreal to him. Mm-hmm. He went through this. It was a whirlwind, and it was finally catching up. He was finally taking it all in and being like, I survived. You know what I mean? I got to take a moment, take a breather, and recollect myself.
Exactly. So Neil was honorably discharged from the Marines in 1946. When he did get home, he started trying to adjust back to civilian life and decided that it was time to start dating. Yeah. And his sister, Carmela, knew just who he should start dating. Her best friend, Laura Baldoni, and she lived across the street from them. So Laura and Neil started dating, and it wasn't too long after that when Neil proposed to Laura. Laura was truly in love with him, and she desperately wanted to marry Neil, but her family was a little bit nervous about the relationship / possible marriage. They had heard about his nervous breakdown, and they were just a little uneasy about it, but Laura persisted, and eventually her family agreed to let her marry Neil. And their marriage, it was a happy one. They were married for 50 years. They had 5 children, 4 grandchildren, and a great-grandchild.
That's amazing.
50 years. After Neil and Laura were married, they lived with Neil's sister for a short time while they got on their feet. And Neil used his GI Bill to train in the printing industry. And after his training, he went to work for a newspaper and was able to save enough money to build him and Laura a home in Knollwood, Illinois. So I'm assuming that's probably like a suburb around Chicago. But they didn't stay there for too many years. They did eventually move in 1954, and Neil started working for the Chicago Sun-Times.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sorry, I saw 1954, so my dad would have been 1 year old at that time.
1 year old, yep. Mom was still a twinkle in her parents' eyes. Yeah. Neil's daughter, Linda, she later on would describe what her and her siblings' childhood was like. She said, it was a happy one with lots of laughter and yelling. And she said that she wasn't sure if the yelling was from them being Italian or if it was from his time in the war. And so she told one detail that I thought was really interesting. She said that they never truly understood what their father endured during the war, which makes sense. I mean, they were just children, and there's probably things that he never talked about. And she gave the example of whenever they went swimming and her father would wear his swimming trunks, they thought that he had 6 belly buttons. And it wasn't until years later that they learned that those extra belly buttons were actually scars from the shrapnel. It's interesting to hear it from a child's perspective.
Oh, yeah. They're like, this is awesome.
Our dad has 6 belly buttons. And
it's a little bit more tummy length.
Yes, exactly. Yep. And she said that if they misbehaved, Neil would tell them, quote, "The war made me crazy. What's your excuse?" And she said that their dad could always make them laugh as kids because I guess he had just such a contagious laugh. Neil also loved to be active and do different activities with his kids. He loved walking, going on bike rides, and playing baseball. And Linda also said that he loved to go to the carnival, and he had a competitive streak in him. Maybe a theme with Marines, I don't know.
Oh, that's cool.
And one year they went, and he won so many prizes for his kids at the carnival that the workers asked him to stop playing.
They're like, you're putting us out of business.
Yeah, they're like, you gotta quit, man. You gotta get out of here. I thought that was a funny story.
That is.
And Linda, she also would reminisce about all the food that her mom and dad would always have at the house, which makes sense. They're Italian. So, but she said that she really remembers fresh fruits and vegetables were always available at their home.
I'm sure he went through a very hard time where he ate garbage for
Yeah.
nothing. So being able to provide for his kids, I could see that too being part of it. Like, we're always going to have fresh food.
Absolutely.
Here. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
I actually remember you telling me something about an apple.
Oh yeah, when I was in Iraq, let's see here, where were we at this point? We were done with Nasiriyah. Oh, it was in Al Qud. Yeah, we had made it up there. And we had released some prisoners that Saddam had, and one of the guys you didn't find a lot of people who could speak English well, but this gentleman could speak it perfectly.
Wow.
And talking to him, this is an Iraqi gentleman who was a prisoner. He had told us that he had opposed Saddam for years and spoke up about him, and he was thrown in prison for it.
Oh my god.
But this guy was a doctor there, so he was highly educated compared to most people.
Yeah.
So we had talked to him for a while, and we gave him an apple, and he started crying.
Oh my gosh.
Just an apple. It's funny how some things that are so simple we take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
But he hadn't experienced eating a piece of fresh fruit for a long time.
Who knows what he was
puts
eating?
Things in perspective. Another thing too, while I was out there, is people were just glad to have fresh water.
Oh geez, yeah.
Most of them didn't even have fresh water to drink.
Yeah.
So. But anyway, so I could definitely see, that being kind of one of his things. He's like, we're always going to have fresh fruit and vegetables here at this house.
Yeah, that makes total sense. She said that another thing her father always taught them was, quote, "We are put in this world to help each other."
Simple things like that resonate.
Yeah.
I like that, what he said. You're put in this world to help each other. And it's true. Yeah. You can't go this world solo.
No.
No matter what you may think, you're going to need help at some point.
Exactly.
So we're much better for it when we're working together instead of against each other, because we can be very destructive too, as we've seen talking about these wars.
Exactly. So. Yeah, humans can be, we are so remarkable and capable of such great things, but we are such a destructive species.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
We have capacity for both.
Reminds me of The Office when Dwight's like, only humans could do this.
Yeah.
When he's like...
wasn't he saying that about beavers? He was comparing them to beavers when they went to the landfill. He's like, only humans could do something like this, and beavers.
And beavers, yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Such a great show. I love that show. It's awesome.
We got a little off on a tangent.
That's all right.
Refocus.
Tangents are good.
Yeah.
So as Neil grew older, he joined numerous veterans organizations like the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Disabled American Veterans, American Defenders of the Bataan, and Military Order of the Purple Heart. So he stayed devoted to his military bros, I guess you could say. He would also give speeches at schools about his veteran experience. And in 1967, Neil and Laura, they actually traveled to the Philippines to take part in the 25th anniversary of the Bataan Death March. He said that it was quite the experience to go back there, and the Philippines, they put on a very big ceremony for them and honored them. So, and then in 1995, he was invited to Taiwan, where he received the Medal of Honor for recognition of his outstanding performance and contribution in World War II.
Okay, well, there's the granddaddy of them all. Congressional Medal of Honor. Had a Bronze Star, a Silver Star, a Purple Heart, and then years later, they bestowed the Medal of Honor on him.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. He lived we're not done yet, but he's lived a remarkable life. You know?
Truly has. All right. So back home in December of 1997, the governor of Illinois dedicated December 6th as Neil Iovino Day in recognition of his bravery.
Nice.
So that's pretty cool.
97. So you were 13 then?
Yeah, I was 13.
13. I was 15. It's just a little guy in high school. You know what's crazy about that, though? I was 15, but then 2 years later, I went to the Marines when I was 17.
Yeah, that's insane. So during the 90s, Neil, he participated and went on numerous cruises called the Purple Heart Cruise. These cruises, they were sponsored and funded by donations.
Sounds somewhat similar to what they do now called the honor flights.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. During these cruises, he would meet different politicians. He met Bill Clinton, John McCain. Mm-hmm. So they would come to wish them good luck on their cruise, or not good luck on their cruise, like have fun on your cruise or whatever.
But that was interesting, meeting John McCain, because he was a prisoner of war too for a while.
He was in Vietnam, right?
Yeah.
They probably had some conversations.
Yeah.
So sadly, though, during the late 90s, Laura, his wife, she started suffering from dementia. And sadly, she did pass away in February of 2000 from
pancreatic cancer.
Pancreatic cancer.
That's sad.
Yeah.
The dementia is heartbreaking.
It is.
Because you lose that person mentally.
Exactly.
And then,
while they're still there physically, they're not the same person.
Yeah.
So, it's so sad. And then it was a rough couple of years, because 2 years later, after his wife died, their son actually committed suicide. So these two deaths back to back were really hard on Neil. And so he struggled for a while, but then to help pass the time and to keep his mind off of it, he opened up his home every Tuesday morning, and he would have local veterans come over, and they would just sit in his kitchen. He would serve coffee and pastries, and they would just have conversations and talk. So it kind of gave Neil something to look forward to every Tuesday.
They would shoot the shit
over coffee and pastries. Because, I don't know if it happens anymore. I don't go to McDonald's.
Really? You're not a fan of E. coli?
I'm going to smack you with this mic. But remember back in the day, you'd go in for breakfast and you'd see all the older guys just hanging out? I'm sure it still happens, but...
Mickey D's, baby.
Mickey D's. Coffee and sausage patties.
Yeah, I still like the Big Mac.
It was the onions, I had heard, that was giving everybody E. coli, so...
Onions?
Yeah, there's something wrong with the onions.
Possible? I thought E. coli was a bacteria that originated from meat.
I might be wrong about that.
Well, we don't need to get off this. I was just joking.
But yeah, so that was kind of cool that he did that.
That's too bad about his son.
Yeah. But this Veterans Time that he would have every Tuesday, he really looked at that as a blessing to kind of help him get through those times.
Well, he went through some of his darkest moments with veterans, his brothers.
True. So he kind of leaned back.
And I should say sisters too. Obviously during this time they didn't have any women in combat. A little bit different now, but we had a lot of supporting roles. So I'm sure he maybe through his time, men and women that he met. Was this the time? Maybe it was another story you told me where the husbands went off to boot camp and the wives kept on showing up. Because they missed their husbands.
Yes.
They talked them into letting them peel potatoes and stuff like that.
So I was actually searching for a Veterans Day story for you and I to do. And I ran across these two sisters. They married two men who went off during World War II to Arkansas to boot camp. Yeah. So I'm assuming maybe Army. And they missed their husbands so bad. So these were two Italian sisters. And they missed their husbands so bad that they moved down they actually lived in Illinois, and they moved down to Arkansas. And they would just spend time sweeping the steps. And they would would offer to help peel potatoes and like cook and stuff. And they're like, we don't want to be paid. We just want to be close to where our husbands are. And the Army let it go on for a little while. And then after a while, they're like, you got to go. You got to get out of here. Yeah. So, but I plan on looking into that to see if I can do that as an episode and just, tell their life stories. And the pictures are so adorable. Yeah. Their names were like Angela and Marie something, but pretty cute. But it was during the same era.
But this guy was great. I think he picked a good one. So, Neil, thank you for your service, especially Semper Fi, brother. I hope you're resting in peace. And yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful story.
And he lived to the age of 90. He passed away in October of 2008. So 90 years old. Wow. And the day that he passed away, he was actually wearing a t-shirt that said, "Back to Bataan."
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
How crazy.
That's amazing. He made it to 90 years old.
90 years old. And that shirt is what he passed away in.
That is actually truly amazing, especially somebody who went through so much.
And I have a ton of photos of Neil and his family when he was younger, all the way up to where he was older, his time in the service that I'll post. So
he had 5 children.
Yes, 5 children. I can't remember how many grandkids.
Went on to be happy and healthy.
I hope that they did. I didn't search into them too much just because of their age and stuff.
Wish the best for somebody.
Exactly.
Like that,
Yeah, and his sisters and all of his family.
That's awesome.
But yeah, and thank you, Jared, for doing this with me, and happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service, my love.
Oh, thanks, Boo Boo.
Yeah.
It's fun. I enjoy talking with you. And,
yeah.
I think it's good to not only just be able to have the opportunity to speak about it, but just, this country is amazing. We've had a lot of brave souls through many, many decades past that stand up when they're needed, and they shed blood and they lose their lives for our country. So we should never forget that.
Nope. Should honor them all the time.
Yep. We forge the path for the future generations and for children.
Exactly.
They forged the path for us. So it's important,
It is. And I truly enjoy reading these stories and learning about these individuals. And so speaking of stories, if you have a Paisani tale that you want to send in, maybe you have an Italian-American veteran in your family that you'd like to share, you could send that in to us at itamstories@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, whatever you do for our podcast. And we hope you enjoyed listening to the heroic story of Neil Iovino. And we hope that you all come back to listen to more stories about Italian Americans. And happy Veterans Day. See you next time.
Thank you, everybody.